car, I have about a gallon of gas in here. Hey guys, we're back on the Porsche project today. From the test drive and what I tried to film, hopefully it wasn't too bad. It coughed and sputtered and spit back through the carburetors a lot more than I thought it should. So we are going to delve into these carburetors a little bit more. I've already done this one. This one is on the bench and we will get into that next. So originally, one of my first videos, I put kits in these just pretty much to clean them out, thinking that was a problem. And I didn't want to tear into them without new gaskets, but I probably just wasted my time. But anyway, there was not any real information out there I could find as far as tuning these things. Apparently there's a book that I've read web forums that says it kind of sucks. So I was back and forth about getting that, and then I went to try to order it and found out it's out of print and I don't know when they're going to print it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to check the float level, because that's one thing I've never messed with. I just assumed it was alright. And I'm no carburetor expert, but we shall see. So there is the top plate with the float attached. We'll get into how to check that in a minute from what I've learned. Now I did see in some of the stuff I've looked at online that you want the fuel level to be up above this little shelf, they call it right here. So there's, but it's float bowl shaped. It's kind of odd. There's a little high point, and they think the float should be right up to it or a little over. To me it looks kind of low. I'm sure some's evaporated, but I haven't done anything with this since I pulled it in the garage like 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 2. So, and the other one had some sludge in the bottom. So I'll clean that out and then we'll go into setting the floats. So I was looking at my accelerator pump shot and I'm not getting much. So I'm going to get a little bit out of that side. The other side's dribbling a little. So I may have some trash in those, so we'll pull those squirters out real quick. Deal just pulls out. There's a spring in there you don't want to lose. What I was able to do on the other carb, there's a little tiny hole right there, and that's where it should shoot out. That's what it should look like. All right. There goes the spring. A lucky save. And that hole is kind of D-shaped, and it'll only go in if you get the D pointed in the right direction. Which is on the top. There. Do this one while we're here. Okay. I'm gonna use this little brush and just make sure there's no crap stuck to the bottom of the float bowl. Let me shoot some carb cleaner in there. It's just gas right now. Just to cover all bases. Pull these idle jets out. And what I may get into with this is I need to tune this and change these jets. There's a number on there, but the only way I can read it is with this apparatus. And I've already gone through that exercise on the other carb, and I wrote them down. Sucks to get old. That's a 55. But anyway, and that's how I determined that, in case I need to change that. But let me make sure they're clear. And just pop them back in. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a book apparently that kind of sucks and you can't buy anymore anyway. So fortunately for us, Al Gore invented the internet and we can go and look this stuff up. So what I found on these carburetors, at least, is this is how you set the float. You can see that. I'll zoom in a little bit. You hold it vertical, and with the gasket on it, you want 5 to 6 millimeters gap right there. So we want when it hangs like that, we want that to be 5 to 6 millimeters. So what I've done is I have found some drill bits. So a 6 millimeter, I don't have any metric bits here anyway, is 236, and a 15/64 is like 232. So they call for 5 to 6 millimeter. So you're going to go with this. Hold it up, slide the bit in, and that's actually pretty close. You just want it to kind of hang right there, and you want to just kind of almost barely touch. Now the other carb, that flow was way low, but I am going to adjust this a little bit because the way it acts to me is it's too lean all the time, which I think a low float level would do that. So I am going to bend this metal just a hair to make that a little bit closer to the bit. So on the other carb, just took a pair of ratty old needle nose I found in the street somewhere. I literally found these laying on the street. And we will bend right there just a hair. So I will continue bending on that till I get it to just barely touch. I don't know that I can get that any closer. Another test, and actually you can push the float all the way to the top, but it's got like a multi-stage deal, and you've got this little bit of like deadband, I guess you'd call it, right there. Another test is you can blow until it stops, just like testing setting any other float. And what I found was the drop, the lower level, which I don't know what difference that makes, but they went 12 to 13 millimeters there, which equates to, in my set, at 31/64. And the other carb was kind of way off too. So there's this little stop right here. I will bend that until we are just touching that bit. This gasket makes it a pain in the ass, but that's the way they want you to check it. do it that direction. Hell, I can't hold it. Let's try this. It'll be a little bit tight now. Let me bend that a little bit more. All right, it said 12 to 13. I'm gonna go with that. Okay, with a lot of my internet perusing, I read about setting the throttle shaft, not really the throttle shaft, but the throttle opening gap. Don't get squirted. Not the way I like either. So they talked about setting this throttle blade gap with a feeler gauge, and I could not find that number. I searched everywhere, forums, etc., talking about doing that the way the book said, the book that you can't buy now, which apparently sucks anyway. But for whatever reason, I don't know, it just finally dawned on me that when I bought these carburetors out of a dune buggy magazine back in the 80s, because I couldn't get the Soul Lexus to run right, I had actually put them in with my manual. My manual became hammered, so I put it in a 3-ring binder, but I had actually saved this. And it talks about dialing in your Dellortos, and it was from Claude's Buggies, which I figured probably didn't exist anymore, but that's actually CB Performance, and they're the ones that sell all the parts, and the book you can't get. So it talked about just setting idle, etc. But there was actually a little section in here that talked about if you want to like be a pro, you remove the Dellortos from the shipping container and slip a 4/1000 feeler gauge between the throttle butterfly and inner wall of the throttle bore at the base of the carburetor. Adjust the idle speed screw until you have a snug 4/1000 slip fit in the butterfly on the side of the throttle. So I had that information the whole time. I just forgot I did. So what I have done on the other carb is, I think the problem I was having, the way it was running, I almost feel like my idle speed was adjusted, the amount of the venturi or the throttle plate was open was adjusted too much, so it's almost over into the transition section of the carb. So let's see, there's 4/1000s. On the other carb, that thing was really loose when it went in. This one doesn't feel too bad. Matter of fact, this one may be a little bit tight. Let's open that a little bit. Of course, this is not exact because this thing is so wide, it needs to kind of conform to the curvature. I'm going to call that pretty good. And then typically the idle settings, said to back these out 3.5. These are the idle mixture screws. There's a bypass screw in there, air bleed, where you can adjust the air between the cylinders, and they said to make sure they're closed. I didn't even realize they were there, so I don't think I've ever messed with those. Those are closed. So let's see what we have as far as turns. Half, 1, wow, this is only like 1.5 turns. So we're going to set these at 3.5, which is apparently the magic number. Half, 1.5, 2.5. Shit, fucked it up. Let's try this again. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Do this one. See where this one was. Half, 1, 1.5, like 1 3/4. And this one ended up straight up and down. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Let me recheck this one because I think I screwed that up. You don't really want to wail down on these because you'll mess up the seat in there. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Well, these things are way out of whack. So with that gap set, and that's supposed to be the magic number right there, which is, I mean, that's like nothing. So I guess what it's actually going to be doing is drawing a lot of the air, forcing it through that idle jet. The more I thought about this, the drag on this thing, it's so hard to tell because you're trying to put that in a round hole. So what I've done is, yeah, making it worse. The transition holes are down in here. So my thought was this was open way too far before, and when it's idling, it's actually into the transition holes. Well, you can see like 1.5 of those holes right now, but what I did on this one is just, because of it being so round, just slip the, just use the very edge corner, and that will fit in there. And use that as my guide. Not try to shove the whole thing in there because you're fighting the spring tension of this. So I'm just going to use the corner, and that's the way I've set this one. Now I've unfortunately already put the other carb back on the car, and I didn't use the same technique, but what I'm going to try is pile up feeler gauges right here and see what it'll take to match this gap. You know, something like this. Match this gap to the other one on the other carb, so we're kind of at the same starting point because they're kind of a pain in the butt to take off and on. All right, they're back on the car, and fortunately somebody else's dogs are barking and not ours. I don't know, we'll see. So my thought is that the throttle blade was open too far, which caused me to back way off on the idle mixture jets. That's why they were only like 1.5 turns, because we were partially into the transition circuit, and then when we would drive it, it didn't transition very well because we were already into it. Let's see, it may take a minute to get some fuel up here. Sounds better already. looks like number 2 is not, or number 1 is not even running. That was with no gas. The rattling you heard with all my tools laying in here. Let's see if number 1 is firing now. I'd say yes. I should probably get a new set of spark plugs for this thing. I would do that, but I would say we could go for a ride, but we're kind of still recovering from this. Sounds like we're missing again. Make sure you don't grab the metal when you do that. Come on, baby. Oh, so now we switch to number 3. Sparking. See what's going on there. Okay, I have taken this carburetor back off, cleaned it again, reset everything, restarted. So it looks to be running pretty smooth. I'm going to try to get this video done, but my idle speed's way too high. I have the mixer screws all set the same. I'm going to start backing off. Idle speed screw. See how the engine's jumping a little bit? Hell with that unison. We're just going to do it by ear. Get smooth out. Back to this side. A little over 1,000 RPM. I'm going to call that good. Thanks for watching.